Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Legally Speaking. I'm your host, Ovais Anwar. The Kashmir issue is Pakistan's longest standing dispute. At the international level, this has gone through a number of Security Council resolutions. There have been a number of bilateral engagements with India, multilateral engagements earlier on. But now we seem to have come to an impasse. With the BJP government in India, there's very little room to talk. And this has started affecting our cricketing relations, our political relations, our economic relations. There are a number of factors to this. Most recently, in fact, it's been now 6 years actually, India's abrogation of Article 370, which gave Kashmir some level of protection and insulated it from the internal dynamics and the internal politics of India. That is now gone. To discuss some of these issues, to discuss where we stand with Kashmir today, I'm joined by Mr. Jamaal Aziz. Jamaal Aziz is Executive Director of the Research Society of International Law. Welcome to the show, Jamaal.
Welcome, Ovais.
Jamaal, I wanted to begin by asking you that Pakistan's messaging on Kashmir, it seems the same old messaging that we've had for the last, say, 20, 30, 40 years, right? It's the same arguments, the same discussion points. And certainly, I think Pakistan has had, for the longest time, a very principled position on Kashmir. But as times change, we need to modernize this approach. What do you feel needs to be, really changed in our messaging with regards
Thanks,
to Kashmir?
Ovais. So, we've been looking at the Kashmir issue since the past 15, 16 years now. It's a rite of passage for anyone who's studying international law in Pakistan. And one thing which always, sticks out or catches me as striking is that our talking points feel very outdated, like you mentioned. Whenever we hear Kashmir mentioned at the international level, we engage at different forums as well. The room seems to fall silent always. There is this respectful nodding of the heads, but not much engagement, not much even questioning or pushback. Apart from the Indians, the rest of the international community just seems to have a polite indifference to this issue. And worryingly, we also see in Pakistan, the current generation, 65% of our population is under the age of 30. As we engage and work on these issues, it is quite worrying how less people know about the genesis of the dispute, the different multifaceted, regions that this dispute encompasses and their history and their legalities and their political backgrounds, whether it's GB, AJK, Ladakh, Jammu, Aksai Chain, Saksam Valley, all of these are very, complex areas. So generally speaking, the talking points feel outdated because we haven't done enough in recent years to kind of build a deep understanding of the contemporary aspects of this dispute, coupled with the historical. And internationally, we are not perhaps taking advantage of the subtle paradigm shifts that are taking place, which we hope to discuss in this session today with you, which can make our talking points have more impact. But generally speaking, I agree, Pakistan has taken a principled position, like you said, sticking to the main purpose that self-determination for the Kashmiris is what we want. But on the other hand, and the way we want that is through a UN supervised plebiscite, as envisaged by the UN Security Council resolutions of the 1950s.
Wow. Yep.
But those were from the 1950s. In today's environment, is a plebiscite still realistic? Is it viable? How do we take advantage of the Security Council resolutions, their core essence, without perhaps keeping the plebiscite front and center? This is something.
So Jamaal, this is exactly what I want to discuss. We have these resolutions and they're very clear on what they mandate. They mandate that the only way the Kashmir dispute can be resolved, the only way title can transfer is through a plebiscite, right? An open, fair plebiscite held under the auspices of the UN. Now, history has been the biggest impediment here. We've seen, steps by India, steps by Pakistan that have to some extent thwarted that, right? Do these UN Security Council resolutions, other than this mechanism, do they provide any value to either Pakistan, the Kashmiris, or India in this?
So I think they have tremendous value. But in today's environment, when there is so much misinformation, disinformation, so much time has passed, there is a need for Pakistan to sharpen its communication narrative. And for the Kashmiris to sharpen their communication narrative. You see, the main value that the UN Security Council resolutions crystallize, is, as you mentioned, is that title of Kashmir has not passed to India or Pakistan. This is the foundation of the dispute. The Indians argue that Kashmir is an integral part of India, that the instrument of accession that was signed by Maharaja Hari Singh transferred the sovereignty of Kashmir to India, and the whole of the state of Jammu and Kashmir belongs to it. We contest that. We don't agree. We think that the instrument of accession was fraudulent and that it happened under dubious circumstances. The UN Security Council resolutions endorses Pakistan's position. It says the title has not passed, and the title will only be passed when self-determination is done, and the method, the means for determining self-determination is a plebiscite. Now, the problem is that when you start talking about this, there's a lot of confusion because the Indians will say you were supposed to withdraw troops. We say that no, this happened, you didn't agree to this proposal, and then there was the McNaughton proposal or the Dixon, and it goes into the dustbin of history, which I think damages our position.
Absolutely.
The main position is that the Security Council resolution said title did not pass. So India in today's environment is trying to say there is no dispute. This is
but what if, I mean, say we take this position. What if India's argument that the Constituent Assembly, which was a representative of the people, they adopted the instrument of accession, and therefore, even if it was fraudulent or didn't really exist, now it's been ratified by the people of Kashmir?
So this is an excellent question. You see, the Indians have always been, and this is, I think, needs to be one of the themes of the discussion we have today, is that the Indians have always been flexible in their approach to Kashmir. They have taken advantage of the evolving political environment. So initially, when partition happened, the principle of partition was that a Muslim majority state would go to Pakistan and the Hindu majority state would go to India. Now, Kashmir was the biggest kind of violation of that. The Indians knew it. So they were on the back foot, and they proposed, in order to diffuse the tension, they proposed the matter should be taken to the UN Security Council.
Okay, wow.
So the Indians took this.
Yeah.
Now the Indians, when the Security Council resolution started going against them and the matter was tangled up over there, the Indians said, look, this is a legal vacuum right now. The matter is tangled up in the UN. We need a mechanism to govern the part that is under our control. Okay. So they came up with Article 370 of the Constitution. They said that we've given you a special status. We're not going to, your sovereignty will remain intact. We're not going to, impose our constitution upon you. So Article 370 was a stopgap. Then they came up with what you mentioned. The Constituent Assembly came up with a constitution for Kashmir, and that Constituent Assembly ratified the instrument of accession. It doesn't matter that the fact that that assembly came into a power as a result of massively rigged elections. But to answer your
widely
recognized. To answer your question, there are two explicit Security Council resolutions, Resolution 91 and 122, both of which say that what the Constituent Assembly did was of no legal value. So when the Constituent Assembly was established in 1951, Resolution 91 said any decision it takes on Kashmir will not be regarded as a final settlement of the dispute. And then in 57, when they ratified the instrument, again the Security Council said that it has no value. You see, these are important legal points. What happens is that the argument goes into, this is a Chapter 6 resolution or a Chapter 7 resolution, it's binding or not binding, but the main point is that the resolutions keep the dispute intact.
Absolutely.
The dispute is intact, the sovereignty of Kashmir is intact, it has not passed to India or Pakistan, and so India's wishes to push this under the table, which has been its strategy since 1947, but now they've become much more bold about it. The Security Council resolutions are the biggest impediment to that.
And I think they also the Security Council resolutions cement certain legal principles that apply here.
Correct.
And that is that the title has not transferred, no matter what any party may say, no matter how loud their messaging is and whatnot. So I'm really glad that you helped clarify this. Jamaal, I want to turn in domestically, right? It's been 70, almost 80 years since this dispute has arisen. Have we lost hope domestically that something's going to happen? Is that a part of the reasoning why, say, the younger generation isn't aware or isn't as emotionally attached to Kashmir as say we were when we were kids? Right?
So definitely there are multiple reasons for that, and I would say globally, domestically, and what is happening on Indian strategy as well. Globally, there are so many more disputes now. right? The world seems to be on the cusp of, a major global conflict. The rules-based order is unraveling. Different, conflicts, different energies. So there is a lot of distraction. And Kashmir, which was that historical dispute, has kind of gone into the background. Secondly, you're right, domestically in Pakistan, there has been a disconnect. People don't, and that is tied to your first question on the messaging, because every 5th February, 27th October, 5th August, we have these different dates in the year in which, the posters come up and on the khambas and on the bridges, and, and those posters, there's messaging, the font, the whole messaging looks very outdated, and it just looks like a repeat of everything, and people don't really even know what is the history of 5th February, or what is the history of 27th October, or what really happened on 5th August even, right? So part of it is, we are to blame for that, but the Indian strategy has also been to showcase that, this is shining India, it is too powerful, aligned with the West, and their strategy, like I said, they keep changing the goalposts. After Simla, they said this is a bilateral issue. Then they were on the back. Then it became a terrorism issue after 9/11. Now it's a internal issue. It's a unilateral dispute, and now they're saying actually the only issue is GB and AJK, and our part is with us. So it has come as a result of multiple factors, but in the last couple of years, I think the Indians have been wrong-footing themselves in their arrogance, in their stubbornness to not engage with Pakistan, and in the missteps that they have done. I feel that the ground is shifting. Okay. There are shifts domestically and there are shifts internationally. We can perhaps discuss that.
Absolutely. You mentioned that the international rules-based order is collapsing. Despite this collapse that you see all around you, do the Security Council resolutions or the international legal mechanisms, such as the United Nations, such as the International Court of Justice, do they still have relevance, or has that also reduced?
So, I mean, this is an opportunity for us, I think. Yes, definitely the international rules-based order has been on the decline for the past 2 decades now, actually. But now it just, in today's world, it seems to be unraveling much faster as, ruptures are taking place. But having said that, in a strange way, even though the institutions of international law require deep overhaul, whether it is the Security Council or the courts of justice or others, but the principles of international that underline international law, such as humanitarian law, human rights law, principles such as self-determination, these are foundational principles that reflect the shared values of humanity. Those were the bases on which the world came together after major conflict. So in my view, these are the values which humanity coalesces around once, the reckoning has happened and, you've come out of the ashes. So these are the shared values that you're not going to kill, you're not going to maim, you're not going to seize territory by force, you're not going to displace populations. So I think that those principles are very much intact today, but they just require re-engagement. And the world is looking for champions from the global south to reflect these values. And I think that this is what Pakistan did very effectively. The UN Security Council resolutions in the 50s was the result of outstanding diplomacy, principle-based diplomacy, which the Pakistanis did, not just for Kashmir, but we did it for Palestine and we did it for rights movements all over the world.
Yeah, right? Absolutely.
So I think that in today's environment, especially after what has happened in Gaza, occupation frameworks and self-determination frameworks have come back into the limelight very strongly. And I think that as diplomats or international lawyers, Pakistan needs to be pushing back on the issues which have undermined these conflicts. So for that, the main one would be terrorism. We need to push back on the terrorism labeling, and we need to consider the right of resistance to occupation.
That's a very important point that you've raised. Jamaal, could you just help us to understand this a little bit? Just explain to us the difference between an occupation and annexation, because these are terms that we're seeing both in Gaza, in the West Bank, as well as in Kashmir. And the parallels that people draw are based on a lot of these things.
Yeah. So the definition of occupation is contained in international instruments, right? The Hague Regulations and the Geneva Conventions, and they have different, and the ICRC, all of these, established principles say that when a state has unconsented to control over territory that it does not have title to, right?
Yeah.
So this is the essential definition of an occupied state, that you don't have title, that
you haven't been invited there.
You've not been invited there, and you operate there without consent, and you have effective control.
Yeah.
Right. Now, this is classically, if you look at it in Kashmir and in Palestine, both of these are occupied territories. And the reason why both of these territories are on the UN roster as being accepted as having disputed status. So the disputed status is that first critical limb, that you don't have title. Now the second question is, in Kashmir, effective control. Effective control doesn't need discussion, because
it's the most militarized
600,000 troops
zone in the world.
Imposing your own laws and everything. So that doesn't even require. The question is it unconsented to? Right? The Indians say that we came as a result of this. The Maharaja Hari Singh invited us. We have an instrument of accession, so it is not unconsented to. This is a point which Pakistan has not really built upon as much as it should have, right? Modern interpretations of this, and as we saw in the decisions of the international criminal courts in Tajik and other cases as well, is that if that country, if that state, if its forces are the methods, are the means by which people are denied the right of self-determination, then it is regarded as unconsented to presence, right? So it is the Indian state's presence, it is their policies by which they are by which self-determination is being blocked. It becomes so. In Pakistan's case, Indians like to say Pakistan occupied Kashmir, but how are we an occupied state? Our constitution has Article 257, which says when the people decide to join Pakistan, their relationship will be determined according to their wishes.
Yeah, so the Pakistani constitution guarantees self-determination.
Exactly.
Whereas the Indian constitution does not.
The AJK constitution has the post of plebiscite administrator. It has the whole mechanisms for that. In fact, our regions have suffered. AJK and GB, their governance has suffered because we have taken a principled position for the last 80 years that we're waiting for the plebiscite, we're waiting for the self-determination to happen. Whereas the Indians are denying that on their side, right? So that side is an occupied territory, our side is Pakistan administered Kashmir. This is a very important distinction that has value in today's world as well. But we need to, having said that, legality has its own value, but how are you proving that forward? How are you taking advantage? Because those traditional mechanisms which Pakistan thought that we could rely on, the UN Security Council, the UN human rights bodies, the different rapporteurs and the different methods, all those avenues in today's environment seem very unrealistic. Those pathways seem blocked. Yeah. So the question is, how does Pakistan adapt its diplomacy? How does it adopt its strategic and its tactical posture to take advantage of the shifts that are happening, but importantly, keeping the self-determination and the rights and the freedoms of the Kashmiris front and center?
So Jamaal, before I get to these options that Pakistan has, the people of Kashmir have, I wanted to go back to the posture that Pakistan has adopted. We've, at least for the last 30, 40 years, as far as I can remember, we've been a very status quo oriented. Our approach has certainly been with regards to Kashmir. Why do you think that is, and why do you think India, especially under BJP, especially under Modi, has been so adventurous in terms of trying to change that status quo? Abrogation of Article 370, you have the attacks after Pulwama, the attacks after Pahalgam, the recent skirmishes that hostilities, open hostilities that we've had. They're willing to change the dynamics there. They've changed their own constitution, which people thought was impossible to do, right? This was then ratified by their Supreme Court. So a bunch of changes we've seen from that side, whereas in Pakistan, it's always been more status quoist.
This is a very good question. That there could be multiple reasons for it, but I agree completely with your assessment that we have been very status quo oriented. The reason why GB and AJK, their statuses have not, GB especially, AJK still has its own, it's an independent state, it has its own constitution, it has different, rights and principles, but GB has been administratively governed for the past 70 years. Yeah. And the reason why it used to be that this would affect our principled position before the UN Security Council. But in 2000, I believe it was 2017, when the Sartaj Aziz Committee report came out, that's been 9 years from now, which it explicitly said that no, it will not affect our principled position, if we give rights, if we have followed this formula, still we haven't done it, right? So this is and generally speaking, we reacted with 5th August with shock. The BJP had it in their manifesto from the 80s, but especially when they came to power in 2014, they said the first thing we're going to do, or was it 2015 when they came into power, one of the main things that we're going to do is that we're going to abrogate Article 370. We always used to see it as bravado, as bluster. We never really kind of anticipated that this was going to happen. So yes, I think one of the major answers to your question is that our strategic culture has weakened on decision making, right? So some issues, like, it doesn't get bigger than Kashmir, right? This was an issue which in the past used to elicit whole of, everyone used to be on the one page, and there used to be a lot of avenues for decision making, different avenues, different opinions, but then it would come under one note. That strategic culture has weakened on multiple areas, and Kashmir is one of them, right? So I think the institutions and the mechanisms responsible for wargaming, forecasting and reacting have weakened, which we don't see it as much, luckily, in the nuclear realm, right? In the nuclear realm, Pakistan has strong institutions, a strong strategic culture. Everyone is on the same page. So you are able to deal with robustness to how global and domestic shifts are happening. Kashmir, however, has suffered from this dilution in our strategic culture.
I think that's a very critical point. Jamaal, I want to now get to options, right? When we're looking at Kashmir, we've always said that we have very limited options given our economic weakness compared to India, perhaps the conventional military strength that India has, and that really limits what we have. But I think the game has changed quite a bit, and not only because of, say, the recent skirmishes that we've had, or the hostilities rather that we've had with India, where Pakistan was able to acquit itself very, very well, bringing down Indian jets and whatnot. But so on the conventional front, I think Pakistan has been able to show that it can muster up what needs to be done. Even diplomatically now, right? Whereas India had a policy of trying to isolate Pakistan, we have been able to stand up and really show our relevance to the world and be included in things like the Gaza Board of Peace, things like that. Having looked at that, where do you think Pakistan can go when it comes to Kashmir? And secondly, in a world with a collapsing international rules-based order, with entities such as the Gaza Board of Peace emerging as almost alternatives to the UN, can we have some mechanism like that, and our role in that?
So I mean, these are, I think, very interesting questions. Maybe I take it in a two-part answer.
Okay.
The first thing is that I think Pakistan has a lot of options, but we need a consolidated strategy. We need to have a hard rethink on what are the realistic end states that Pakistan envisages. Right?
What we ultimately want to achieve.
What do we ultimately want? What do the Kashmiris want? Where is that alignment? And what is the absolute red line? Right? What do we don't want happening? Right? So this is kind of because there are different formulas have emerged over the 8 decades of this dispute. Are we willing to, is it that we're going to stick it out no matter what happens? The UN is going to be, we want a third party arbitrator to resolve this. So is that the posture? Or are we okay with a bilateral one and a bilateral settlement along the current LOC? Or are we willing to make a unilateral position right now to kind of safeguard what we have and see what's going to happen later? Or
so include, for example, GB and AJK to Pakistani territory?
Or are we willing to advocate for an independent Kashmir altogether? Right? What would that look like? What are the red lines? I mean, these are just, I'm not saying these are options or not options, but that thinking is required.
It's part of the consideration.
Any strategy needs to look at all the options that go in your favor and that go against your favor. And then the ones that go in your favor, what are the realities in the current environment? What are the opportunities for you and what are the risks for you? Right? So this is something which requires thinking. Now, as far as I think that there are a lot of shifts, like you mentioned, internationally. The point is that the Indians have certain strengths on Kashmir, right? They have that control, they have their effective control, they're able to muzzle dissent, they're able to hold on to territory. But there is a massive Hindu-Muslim divide, right? Which we can see it coming. It was always there, but because of the Hindutva policies of the BJP, coupled with the fact that shining India doesn't look as shiny anymore, right? There are open, so many things to mention, but their argument that it is basically a development issue. If development in Kashmir is provided, then this whole issue is going to go away, and terrorism is happening through Pakistan. It's actually a terrorism issue. All of those things are, being exposed. The people are not buying it. The election showed that, and there is more resentment today than there was in the past 10 years, right? So there's a lot that Pakistan can be patient as well. But at the same time, while it's being patient, what are the shifts that it needs to take advantage of? One of the shifts is that we need to push back on the terrorism labeling. The terrorism labeling has actually contributed to the unraveling of the rules-based order all over the world. And it is amazing how similar the Israeli playbook is, the Indian and Israeli playbooks in Palestine and Kashmir. There's a lot of similarities on that. And we need to kind of highlight those and push back on the same reasoning.
In terms of both strategy and tactics.
Exactly.
Right.
Occupation and annexation, and saying everything is terrorism based and using that as a fig leaf to push the settler colonial agenda. Right? So this, we need to be pushing for the fact that the terrorism labeling has run its course. It has contributed to the unraveling. It has contributed to the destruction of Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Syria, Libya, everywhere. And now, when Trump says he wants Greenland, then everyone is kind of freaking out, right? So it's actually these, mechanisms like terrorism, which has undermined human rights law, which has undermined humanitarian law, which has gone on steroids and needs to be brought back into size, cut down to size, number one. Number two, we have to make sure that, when it comes to the Trump peace plan and the border, I myself personally have reservations around it, because if you look at the language of the plan, it's talking about economic development, it is talking about empowerment, it is talking about it is treating Gaza as a real estate issue, right? And there is no mention of human rights law, there's no mention of humanitarian protections, no mention of occupation, nothing at all. And the whole focus is on disarming Hamas and other terrorism groups. So you're hearing the word terrorism, economic development, and stability. This is what the Indians are also trying to echo or mirror in Kashmir, right? This has to be pushed back against. And at the same time, because we cannot kind of shut our eyes to everything, like you said, because of Pakistan's military and diplomatic successes of the last year, we've gotten ourselves a place at the table. So we need to make sure that when we're at this table, Kashmir is also mentioned, occupation frameworks are mentioned, and we have clarity on our red lines. Going back to what I started already, if you have clarity on your strategy and where you want to go, then you can use your place at the table effectively. But we can't use Kashmir as we can't treat it as a real estate issue. We are the ones who have been talking about self-determination. Right?
About the rights of the people.
About the rights of the people. So the rights of the people have to be front and center. But, and that brings me to my final point, what you say and what you do, it has to be at least as aligned as possible. And if Pakistan is saying one thing and doing another thing, whether internationally or domestically, then I think it weakens your position across the board. So I think that the parts that are under our control, administrative control, GB and AJK, there's a lot of resentment. We can't wait for the plebiscite formula anymore. We have to give better rights. We have to overhaul the governance of that region. We have to show why the parts under our control are far superior and far better with more protections and freedoms than the Indian side. If you start doing that, you will start seeing a better shift, for the whole dispute. And I think that requires a rights-based approach for the whole country.
No, absolutely, Jamaal. Jamaal, I'm really grateful for you taking out the time. This has been a very insightful discussion, serious, and certainly looking at the options that we have, but bringing clarity to the issue, I think, is fundamental for us both domestically and internationally. So thank you very much, Jamaal. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks.